There are voids that nothing can ever fill. And for the narcissist, the emptiness you left behind is the sentence they must live with every single day. They will never admit it. They'll smile, act indifferent, post radiant photos with someone new, as if you never existed. But deep inside, in a place no one sees, is a restless mind, a cracking ego. Because when you walked away, you didn't just take your presence, you took their lifeline, your attention, your empathy, and the emotional reactions they once fed on. Your silence is the only punishment they cannot manipulate. And in today's video, I'm going to show you undeniable proof that the narcissist feels your absence every day, every hour, every moment. No matter how strong they pretend to be, the truth remains crystal clear. They don't have you anymore. And that is what drives them out of control. 1. Absence is not the end, it's the beginning. You once believed that walking away meant the end, that when you were no longer there, everything would stop: the love, the pain, the hope. But the truth is, leaving is not the end. It's the first doorway back to yourself. When you walk away from a narcissist, the first feeling isn't relief. It's confusion, it's emptiness. It's questioning yourself, wondering if you were wrong, if you were too harsh, too cold, for choosing silence and disappearance. But behind those painful questions, something miraculous begins to unfold. You are taking back control of your life. The narcissist doesn't fear your hatred. They fear your lack of reaction. No more sadness, no more blame, no more concern. Because for them, life is sustained by the emotions you pour into them, even if those emotions are negative. And when you go silent, not out of pride, but because there is no longer a reason to speak, they know the game is over. You're no longer there to explain. You're no longer there to forgive. You're no longer there to be a backdrop for a performance that never belonged to you. You once thought that if you just tried a little harder, compromised a little more, understood a little deeper, they would change. But you know what? No one can fill a void that the other person refuses to admit even exists. And when you walk away quietly, without yelling, without justification, that is the moment you tell the world, I deserve better than this. That is a declaration of courage. Not everyone has the strength to walk away from something they once hoped for. Not everyone dares to withdraw from a relationship they poured their heart into. But you did. And that is not weakness. It's a silent strength that manipulators can never measure. When you disappear, they will try to act like nothing happened. They'll smile, post pictures, pretend to be happy, but behind those pictures is an emptiness they have no tools to fill. They might find someone else to replace you. But you know what? You are not a position. You are an energy. A mirror that once reflected the best part of themselves and also the part they never knew how to value. And what scares them more than losing you is realizing that you no longer need them. Neediness is the lifeline of a narcissist's ego. When you no longer need them, you cut the very cord of manipulation they spent so long crafting. Do you think they're suffering? Maybe, but not for the reason you think. They don't hurt because they lost you. They hurt because they lost control over you. They don't miss the memories. They miss the emotions you used to provide and the power they once felt watching you fall apart over them. But you are no longer that person. You've stepped out of the cycle. You're no longer the one who always comes back. You are stepping into a new chapter 1 where you understand your worth isn't measured by how much someone else can love you, but by how deeply you love yourself enough to never allow anyone to hurt you again. And the very moment you left was the moment you began to truly live. Not to please anyone, not to be validated, but to be at peace with yourself. That is the beginning, and you are not alone. 2. The void they can't fill. A narcissist can change partners, switch environments, even alter their appearance. But there's one thing they can never replace: the void you left behind. They will never admit it, because in their world, acknowledging loss means admitting defeat. They don't fail, they just choose better. They're not abandoned, they're moving forward. That's the story they want to believe, and they want you to believe it too. But beneath that mask is a different truth. They feel your absence every single day, because you weren't just a lover, a friend, or a companion. You were the one holding up a fragile ego they never had the courage to face. They needed you not because they valued you, but because you made them feel valuable. You gave compliments when they needed them, forgave them when they hurt you, stepped back when they lashed out, held their hand when they felt weak, even if they never said it aloud. You were their emotional storage unit, the one they constantly withdrew from, never giving anything back. Until one day, you closed the door. No noisy, no warning, no explanation, just a key departure. But that very calmness threw them into an inner chaos no one could see. They rushed to find someone new, desperate, impulsive, searching for anyone who could fill the seat you once occupied. But what they forgot is this: you were never a seat. You were an experience, an energy, a heart they could never replicate. They try to smile, post happy pictures, flaunt their new and improved relationship. But if you look closely, the eyes are hollow. The smile is forced. And everything is just a stage. No one can replace the way you love them with all your trust, your patience, your sacrifice. No one can mimic the way you forgave what hurt, chose love over anger, or stayed when all signs said you should leave. And because your love was so real when you withdrew it, they were left with a void nothing else could fill. They may never admit that to you. They may act proud, indifferent, even mock you. But all of that is just a coat of paint covering the cracks spreading underneath. When you were still there, they were the center. But once you left, they were forced to see the part of themselves they always denied. The emptiness incapable of loving anything except their own ego. Do you know what they're really feeling? They feel emptiness, but not because they miss you, but because they miss the power they once held over you. They feel lost, but not because you were important, but because you were the last person still patient enough to stay. And now that you're gone, they have no one left to measure their worth through. The world around them may believe they're fine, that they've moved on, but the void in their soul, it grows larger by the day because they can't replicate what's intangible. The compassion, the gentleness, the understanding that only you once gave unconditionally. The narcissist didn't just lose you. They lost the emotional lifeline they depended on without even knowing it. You were the one who made them feel good enough, even when they treated you terribly. You were the one who anchored them to reality every time they spiraled. You were the only one who saw how fake they could be and still tried to love the little bit of truth that remained. And now, you're no longer there. Your absence isn't loud, but it's deep enough to unravel them piece by piece in silence. 3. The mask can't hide the fear. They show up on social media with radiant smiles. They attend parties, check in at fancy places, talk about new opportunities, and the valuable lessons learned after the breakup. They say they're doing better than ever. But you know what? That's not the truth. It's a mask. Narcissists live behind masks carefully crafted to hide what they fear most, their own inner vulnerability. They were never taught how to accept pain. They were never taught how to face rejection, abandonment, or being truly seen. So they built a false persona, strong, independent, unbothered, but all of it is camouflage for survival. When you left, they didn't fall apart immediately. They performed, and they performed brilliantly. They made everyone believe they didn't care. But those who are perceptive, those who've lived through enough will recognize this truth. The more someone needs to prove they're fine, the more they're falling apart inside. Narcissists don't know how to exist without others mirroring their emotional state. They need admiration to feel important. They need conflict to feel alive. They need control to feel worthy. And you, without knowing, gave them all of that. When you stopped responding, stopped arguing, stopped texting, they were left in a terrifying silence. Not because they missed you, but because they no longer had someone to perform with. What they do best is hide. They never admit fault. They blame. They twist the truth. But when you're no longer there to play the role of too emotional, too weak, too irrational, they lose the mirror that once reflected the version of themselves they wanted to believe in. And do you know what's most terrifying for them? They begin to see themselves, not through your eyes, not through anyone else's H's, but raw and unfiltered, the real self inside, full of old wounds, unmet emotional needs, and a self-worth that was never truly formed. The mask stops working because it can't deceive the person wearing it. You might think, they're not hurting, they already have someone new. But what you don't see is they don't love the new person. They just need someone to cover up the void. And the faster they try to replace you, the deeper the hole you left behind truly is. Don't be fooled by the glitter. They can change their hairstyle, their lifestyle, brag about new successes, but no one can erase their most primal fear in a matter of weeks or months. The fear of facing themselves alone. You were the wall they leaned on to keep from collapsing. They saw you as easy to control, but the truth is, you were their emotional anchor, and they were never mature enough to admit it. When that wall disappeared, the cracks began to show. No matter how many new masks they try to wear, it won't be enough to cover the truth. They don't know how to exist without you, but they will never say it. Because to them, admitting pain is humiliation. It's weakness. It's defeat. So they choose the easier path. Pretending you didn't matter. Pretending they're fine. Pretending the new person is better than you. But the more they pretend, the more they strain. And that strain is the clearest proof that the mask no longer works. You don't need to go back to witness it. All you need to know is this: your silence is a mirror more powerful than any spoken truth. They see themselves in your absence. No one there to regulate their emotions. No one to untangle the mess inside them. No one to make them feel significant the way you once did. And because of that, they begin to fear being forgotten, fear losing control, fear the truth that someone dared to walk away and no longer needed them. The mask is no longer a weapon. It becomes a burden. And the longer they wear it, the heavier it gets. Because deep down, they know something they'll never say out loud. You were the last real thing they ever had. 4. You're not just an ex. You're the mirror of truth. In their eyes, you were supposed to be just another person who leaves. Another one who would endure, then eventually walk away. But what they never expected was that you stayed longer than anyone else. You loved them at their worst. You forgave more than you ever thought you could. You closed your eyes to things you knew were beneath you. Not because you were weak, but because your heart was big enough to still hope. And that is why you're not just an ex. You're the mirror that reflected everything they never dared to face. You were there when they were disappointed in themselves. You were there when they needed praise to feel worthy. You were there when they had no one left to control. And in your silent, non-judgmental presence, you became living proof of what they tried so hard to hide. They wore a mask to fool others, but you were there, quietly seeing through it. They used control to feel powerful. You loved them anyway, not for power, but because you believed they could change. They hurt you and acted like it never happened. And you stayed, picking up the pieces of your heart with no one even noticing, and then you left. No drama, no blame, no public declaration. You simply disappeared, taking with you the one thing they never learned to cherish: the truth. The truth that your presence in their life was a chance to grow. The truth that you believed in them even when they didn't believe in themselves. The truth that if they had dared to take off the mask, maybe, just maybe, you wouldn't have had to leave. But narcissists don't face the truth. They twist it, they manipulate it. They rewrite the story so that they are always the victim, and you're too sensitive, too negative, too complicated. They tell others you were weak, that you didn't know how to love, right? A rule. They rebuild their self-image by tearing yours down. But the truth doesn't need to be defended. The truth exists even in silence. And by quietly stepping away, by refusing to play the blame game, you became the one mirror they can't fog up. Every time they meet someone new, they compare. Not because you were perfect, but because you were the only one who loved them deeply enough to not need to win every argument. You wanted to heal them, not defeat them, but you can't heal someone who uses your wounds to control you. And when you left, the only thing left for them was the raw reflection of who they really are. No one left to manipulate, no one to blame, no one to play the starring role in their drama. Only them, and the reflection you left behind. That mirror didn't hurt them. It only revealed what they've been hiding for so long. They're not truly happy. They're not truly strong. They don't truly love anyone. not even themselves. And do you know what hurts more than your departure? The fact that you don't need them to live your life. You stood back up. You didn't back. You didn't prove anything. You didn't ruin their image. You just left as someone who knows their worth and doesn't need to scream to be seen. And from that moment on, they lost the final thread of control. You're not someone they forgot. You're someone they can't escape. You are the truth. And that truth is something they must face every single day, even if they'll never admit it. 5. Your awakening is their ending. There's one thing they never expected, that you would wake up, not because they underestimated you, but because they truly believed you'd always come back, that you would always put them above yourself, that you would forgive again and again, simply because your heart was too generous and your trust too soft. But then, one day, you stopped choosing them. You chose peace. You chose to close the old chapter. You chose to step out of the toxic cycle, not to fight, not to hope, but to protect the part of you that still remained human. That was your awakening. Not loud, not dramatic, but stronger than any outburst of rage. Because people can argue in anger, but they can't argue with someone who's awakened. When you awaken, you no longer need them to admit their wrongs. You stop searching for reasons to stay. You stop trying to fix them, because you finally understand healing cannot happen where someone denies they need to be healed. And that moment was the end of them, because the greatest power they ever had was the ability to manipulate your emotions. They made you doubt yourself. They twisted truths. They planted guilt. They forced you to explain every tear, every outburst, every why did you change. But when you awaken, that power dissolves. You no longer explain. You no longer try to understand. You no longer play the role of the last kind one. You go quiet. You walk away, not with bitterness, not with hate, but simply by stopping the investment in a space that always drained your soul. And that terrifies them. They can't accept that you've woken up, because awakening means one thing. They can no longer control anyone. No one left to perform with. No one to label too weak so they could feel strong. You broke free, and that freedom was the final scene in the performance they thought they were directing. Your awakening doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't seek revenge or exposure. It is simply a return to your essence, where you know you are worthy of a love that doesn't come from control. And the most painful truth for a narcissist is not that you left them, but that you're still living, smiling, growing without them. They once believed they were the center, but when you stepped out of their orbit, you didn't just change direction. You shattered the entire belief system they tried to trap you in. Your presence was once their emotional fuel. Your awakening was the bell that rang in their soul. But ironically, they lacked the courage to face that sound. So instead, they seek someone new. They try to repeat the same old patterns. But this time, they feel unfulfilled. Because no one is as naive as you once were. No one is as patient. Or no one will forget themselves for them like you once did. Losing you wasn't just losing a lover. It was losing the source of the illusions they used to paint their identity. And you, the one who once loved them the most, are now the one who made them realize love is not submission. Love is not chasing. Love is not shrinking yourself to fit someone who keeps shifting the frame just to keep you off balance. Love begins with awakening. And once you awaken, you don't go back, not out of anger, but because you finally understand you deserve a journey that never asks you to lose yourself again. 6. They feel it every day, even if they'll never admit it. There are forms of longing that have no words. There are voids no one can see, yet they linger, persist, and never truly fade. That is what's happening in the inner world of a narcissist after you leave. They won't text you. They won't post, "I miss you." They won't admit that day after day, their eyes still drift toward the space where you once stood. But you are still there, like a shadow they cannot erase. Not because you were perfect. Not because they loved you in the right way, but because you were the only one who stayed long enough, deep enough, real enough, to reflect their true self back to them, even if just for a fleeting moment. When you were there, you were a mirror without judgment. You didn't walk away when they were moody. You didn't turn your back when they were unpredictable. You loved even knowing they didn't love you the way you needed. And when you quietly walked away, you took with you the entire reflection they once depended on to feel significant. They will never say this out loud, because to admit they feel your absence is to admit they needed you, and their ego simply won't allow it. Instead, they laugh louder. They live faster. They show off more, but it's all surface. Beneath it all, you are still there. In every situation where they once leaned on your presence, when they feel disappointed in themselves, when they're hurt by someone new, when they need someone to see the most fragile part of them, they think of you. They remember how you used to gently ask, "Are you okay?" They remember how you would stay silent, not to win, but to keep the peace. They remember the small things, how you made their coffee, how you hugged them from behind, how you smiled, even when your heart was unsettled. All of that they feel every day, but they won't admit it. They can't, because if they did, they'd have to face the truth. They lost the only person who ever truly cared, and it was their fault. And that is a kind of pain the narcissist cannot bear, not because they loved you too deeply, but because it strikes at the truth they've always avoided. They can't keep anyone once the mask falls off, so they choose silence. They pretend you no longer exist in their mind. They say, "You're just the past." But late at night, when the noise of social media fades, when the new person no longer excites them, when all the masks begin to crack, they think of you, not with joy, but with a quiet regret, a feeling they themselves can't name, because you weren't someone who abandoned them. You were the one who gave more than anyone else, and in the end, chose yourself. That makes you irreplaceable. They might try to love someone else. They might dive into new games, new faces, but they will never again find someone who looked at them, not with eyes, but with a heart. And that is what makes you the wound that won't heal. They feel you in the absence. They feel you when the new connections fall short. They feel you when they long for someone real, and no one is as real as you once were. They won't say it. They never will. But they feel you every day. You're no longer there, but the echo of your departure remains. It resounds in lonely nights, in quiet failures, in the moments they look in the mirror and no longer see eyes reflecting back love. You were the light in their dark room, and now that darkness remains because you took the lamp with you. They won't say thank you. They won't say sorry. They don't know how. But if one day you feel uneasy, wondering whether you ever truly mattered, remember this: there is someone out there who feels you in silence every single day. And that is the quietest yet clearest proof that your presence was never meaningless. When you choose yourself, you've already won. Maybe you once loved someone who didn't know how to love you back. Maybe you hoped, forgave, endured, and finally let go. But hear me clearly, you are not weak. You've just begun the most powerful journey of your life, the journey of choosing you. Walking away from a narcissist isn't the end of a relationship. It's the beginning of an awakening. When you are no longer there to be manipulated, blamed, or provoked, you've done the one thing they feared most. You've broken free from their control. You've returned to your original worth, no validation needed, no apology required from the one who hurt you. And that is the deepest form of victory. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't need anyone to pay for what they did. Because the truth is, they now live every day in a world without you. And that's a reality they'll never have the courage to face. You don't need to become hard to prove your strength. You just need to keep walking forward with peace in your heart. That alone is enough. You are living proof that healing is real, that awakening is possible, that self-love is worth everything. If this journey has ever been your story, or if you're in the middle of it right now, I want you to know you are not alone. And if what I shared today touched your heart, please consider subscribing to The Healing Voice, because here you'll always find gentle reminders empowering encouragement, and light at the end of every emotional tunnel. Let this voice walk beside you as you heal, awaken, and become the strongest version of yourself. You were once underestimated, but today you know your worth. And that is something no one can ever take away.